We are live. I'm Dr. Ryan Holsapple. I have a PhD in psychology, and today I'm going to explore with you why I believe Sam Harris is wrong about free will. And the format I will be using is through sharing my screen and actually watching an interview Sam Harris did with Lex Friedman. Lex Freedom. That'll work. There we go. A little Freudian slip for you. But I'm gonna talk about an interview he did and discuss with you why I believe he does not really understand free will, or at the very least is wrong about it. So I'm gonna share my screen and get straight into the video, and we will chat about this together.
Colleagues or enemies with that. Unlike many other illusions, that's a more fundamental claim. It's not that it's wrong. It's not even wrong. I mean, that's, I guess, that was I think Wolfgang Pauli who.
Oops. Forgive me.
Veridical experience. You just take like a visual illusion. There are visual illusions that, a lot of these come to me on Twitter these days. There's these amazing visual illusions where, like, every figure in this GIF seems to be moving, but nothing in fact is moving. You can just like put a ruler on your screen and nothing's moving. Some of those illusions you can't see any other way. I mean, they're hacking aspects of the visual system that are just eminently hackable, and you have to use a ruler to convince yourself that the thing isn't actually moving. Now, there are other visual illusions where you're taken in by it at first, but if you pay more attention, you can actually see that it's not there, right? Or it's not how it first seemed. Like the Necker cube is a good example of that. Like the Necker cube is just that schematic of a cube, of a transparent cube, which pops out one way or the other. One face can pop out and the other face can pop out. But you can actually just see it as flat with no pop out, which is a more veridical way of looking at it. So there are kind of inward correlates to this, and I would say that the sense of self and free will are closely related. I mean, I often describe them as two sides of the same coin, but they're not quite the same in their spuriousness. I mean, so the sense of self is something that people, I think, do experience, right? It's not a very clear experience.
So first, we have to understand that his argument requires us to accept the presupposition that free will isn't even an illusion, meaning whatever it is that we think we have, even that itself is not reliable. And then we have to go a layer below that and realize that the self is an illusion, but it's a more reliable illusion than free will is. And in order to accept those two premises, I hope he'll make a good argument. I'm very skeptical of such an argument.
But it's not, I wouldn't call the illusion of self an illusion. But the illusion of free will is an illusion in that as you pay more attention to your experience, you begin to see that it's totally compatible with an absence of free will. You don't, I mean, coming back to the place we started, you don't know what you're going to think next. You don't know what you're going to intend next. You don't know what's going to just occur to you that you must do next. You don't know how much you're going to feel the behavioral imperative to act on that thought. If you suddenly feel, oh, I don't need to do that. I can do that tomorrow. You don't know where that comes from. You didn't know that was going to arise. You didn't know that was going to be compelling. All of this is compatible with some evil genius in the next room just typing in code into your experience. Just like this, okay, let's give him the, oh my God, I just forgot it was going to be our anniversary in 1 week thought, right? Give him the cascade of fear. Give him this brilliant idea for the thing he can buy that's going to take him no time at all, and this overpower.
Okay, so quickly he's conflating something. He's conflating the arising of thoughts, sense impressions, and impulses with the idea of freedom, so that anything that arises is automatically outside of the purview of our will. Therefore, the will must be an illusion because we didn't control anything that came up into our consciousness. It just happened to us. And as a next progressive step, therefore, our choices also are just another thing that appear but are not really real. I'll tell you why this is a problem in a little bit, but let's let him keep going.
Our sense of relief. All of our experience is compatible with the script already being written, right? And I'm not saying the script is written. I'm not saying that fatalism is, the right way to look at this, but we just don't have even our most deliberate voluntary action where we go back and forth between two options, thinking about the reason for A and then reconsidering and going thinking harder about B and just going eeny, meeny, miny, mo until the end of the hour. However laborious you can make it, there is a utter mystery at your back, finally promoting the thought or intention or rationale that is most compelling and therefore deliberate, behaviorally.
I want you to notice what he just did there. Finally presenting the thing which is most compelling. And what it assumes is that the idea of being compelled as a subject is an act that is outside of any illusion of control that we could possibly engage. So that all of our sense impressions, all of our thoughts, all of our impulses are smuggled into this idea that we are identical as what appears with what appears to us. And that's highly problematic because you haven't actually demonstrated that there isn't a separation between the observer and the observed. He's conflated those two things. He's conflated the objects of consciousness with consciousness itself.
Effective and just this can drive some people a little crazy. So I usually preface what I say about free will with the caveat that if thinking about your mind this way makes you feel terrible, well then stop. Get off the ride. Switch the channel. You don't have to go down this path. But for me and for many other people, it's incredibly freeing to recognize this about the mind because one you realize that
realizing you don't have free will frees you. I find that to be a ridiculous statement.
Cutting through the illusion of the self is immensely freeing for a lot of reasons that we can talk about separately. But losing the sense of free will does two things very vividly for me. One is it totally undercuts the basis for
free will. Really, realizing I didn't have free will really helped me, who doesn't exist. Me, who has no real identity. What a relief it was to my fake self that doesn't exist. Oh boy.
For the psychological basis for hatred, right? Because when you think about the experience of hating other people, what that is anchored to is a feeling that they really are the true authors of their actions. I mean, that someone is doing something that you find so despicable.
There goes the whole notion of personal responsibility. We can't possibly be truly responsible for our behavior because we don't have free will. What a relief that we can unburden each other and ourselves from this idea of taking responsibility from for our own actions.
Right. Let's say they're targeting you unfairly. Right. They're maligning you on Twitter, or they're suing you, or they're doing something. They broke your car window. They did something awful, and now you have a grievance against them, and you're relating to them very differently emotionally in your own mind than you would if a force of nature had done this. right? Or if it had just been, a virus, or if it had been a wild animal, or a malfunctioning machine, right? Like, to those things, you don't attribute any kind of freedom of will. And while you may suffer the consequences of catching a virus, or being attacked by a wild animal, or having your car break down or whatever, it may frustrate you. You don't slip into this mode of hating the agent in a way that completely commandeers your mind and deranges your life. I mean, you just don't. I mean, there are people who spend decades hating other people for what they did, and it's just pure poison.
So it's a useless.
This is what's called a false dichotomy. That you need to believe the other person doesn't have free will in order to let go of your resentment towards them. That's not really true. You can believe that someone else is responsible for their actions and still choose to forgive them. So again, he's conflating all sorts of premises that need to be unpacked more. And his argument depends on us accepting that you can just cram these premises together quickly, like the idea that what appears to us is identical with the fact that we make choices, so that the appearance of objects in consciousness, like a thought or an impulse or irritability, is the same thing as choosing to engage them. Whereas that hasn't been demonstrated, that's only been simply stated.
Shortcut to compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
But the question is, say that let's call, what was it, the horse of consciousness? Let's call it the consciousness generator black box that we don't understand. And is it possible that the script that we're...
Hi everyone, thank you for joining. I'm seeing your comments and I appreciate you being here. I'm not monetized. I appreciate you offering to make a donation. I don't currently have an option for that. I'm working for free today, so thank you though. That's very sweet of you. And yeah, so Orthodox Tony said this is a very Calvinist approach. Indeed, as far as I have very limited information about Calvinism, I understand that it's a very deterministic theology.
Walking along, that we're playing, that's already written, is actually being written in real time. It's almost like you're driving down a road, and in real time that road is being laid down. And this black box of consciousness that we don't understand is the place where the script is being generated.
Yeah, that's the key point. This black box of consciousness that we don't understand. See, his argument presumes that we do understand consciousness, that the self is an illusion, that choice, therefore, is a secondary illusion to the illusion of selfhood. But it's loaded with premises that we haven't really demonstrated. And Sam, being a avid meditation instructor, I think gets this from things like Advaita Vedanta, which is a Hindu philosophy, or other Eastern religions that teach that we're just along for the ride of our experiences. We're witnesses without a will, and therefore consciousness merely watches what happens, but has no real ability to impact what happens next.
So it's not, it is being generated. It didn't always exist. So there's something we don't understand that's fundamental about the nature of reality that generates both consciousness. Let's call it maybe the self. I don't know if you want to distinguish between those.
Yeah, I definitely would. Yeah.
You would, because there's a bunch of illusions we're referring to. There's the illusion of free will, there's the illusion of self, and there's the illusion of consciousness. You're saying, I think you said you're not as willing to say there's an illusion of consciousness. You're a little bit more.
In fact, I would say it's impossible.
Yeah. You're a little bit more willing to say that there's an illusion of self, and you're definitely saying there's an illusion of free will.
I'm glad that he's willing to admit that it's impossible that consciousness is an illusion. There is a subfield in consciousness studies called eliminativism or illusionism, which argues that the whole idea that you're a sentient being having experiences is an illusion, which is a self-contradictory argument, because the fact that you're experiencing something is evidence that it's happening. So regardless of what ontological status you are willing to grant your experiences, they cannot be an illusion because they exist self-presently. They exist right now. They're happening. You know you're having an experience. So that Sam and I can agree on.
Well,
Yes. I'm definitely saying there's an illusion, that a certain kind of self is an illusion. Not every, we mean many different things by this notion of self. So maybe I should just differentiate these things. So consciousness can't be an illusion because any illusion proves its reality as much as any other veridical perception. I mean, if you're hallucinating now,
Exactly.
that's just as much of a demonstration of consciousness as really seeing what's, quote, actually there. If you're dreaming and you don't know it, that is consciousness.
Exactly.
Right. You can be confused about literally everything. You can't be confused about the underlying claim, whether you make it linguistically or not, but just the cognitive assertion that something seems to be happening. It's the seeming that is the cash value of consciousness.
Can I take a tiny tangent?
Okay.
So what if I am creating consciousness in my mind to convince you that I'm human? So it's a useful social tool.
Again, missing the point, Lex. He's saying that you're experiencing it, therefore it self justifies itself. It's just happening. So you have to separate ontology from epistemology. Ontology is the underlying bedrock of what is reality? What type of universe do we live in? What is the basis for consciousness? And then epistemology is, how do we know what we know? What is the vehicle for our knowledge? And when it comes to just understanding that we're having experiences, that is something that we can look at through the perspective of being an existent reality. So you're having an experience. It's really self-explanatory. It's one of those things that baffles me that we even have to talk about.
Not a fundamental property of experience, like of being a living thing. What if it's just like a social tool to almost like a useful computational trick to place myself into reality as we together communicate about this reality?
I love it when materialists who try to reduce the universe to this mechanistic computational metaphor tend to use words that impute consciousness without realizing it. Take a word like usefulness. So a lot of times evolutionary neo-Darwinian theorists will say so-and-so exists because it was useful. Let's say sexual preference or aggression. It was useful. Okay, useful to what? If consciousness isn't there, there's no mind there, how can you use a word like usefulness? Because usefulness assumes a subject. Usefulness assumes a person or a mind for which something can have utility. There's no such thing as utility without subjective experience. So just notice how in materialistic theories of the universe, people constantly smuggle in the idea of function without anything there, any person, any subjectivity there for function to exist for. So what I'm trying to say is, if the universe is merely a computational process which gives rise to the illusion of consciousness, or even the epiphenomenon, the byproduct of consciousness, you cannot use functional language like usefulness. You have to use accidental language. Be consistent. I don't mind you having a theory, but be consistent with your language. So if you use language like functional or useful, then you are contradicting yourself, because you're saying that there was no consciousness there in the first place, so there's nothing for it to be useful for. Nothing cannot have a relationship to use. There's no usefulness is a teleological term. It's about your orientation, your aim, your goals as a present subject. Drives me crazy when people dismiss these very complex ideas and just in a statement walk right past it.
And another way to ask that, because you said it much earlier, you talked negatively about robots, as you often do. So let me, because you'll probably die first when they take over.
I'm looking forward to certain kind of robots. I mean, I'm not. If we can get this right, this would be amazing.
Right. But you don't like the robots that fake consciousness. That's what you don't like the idea of fake it till you make it.
Well, no, it's not that I don't like it. It's that I'm worried that we will lose sight of the problem, and the problem has massive ethical consequences. I mean, if we create robots that really can suffer, that would be a bad thing, right? And if we really are committing a murder when we recycle them, that would be a bad thing.
This is how I know you're not Russian. Why is it a bad thing that we create robots that can suffer? Isn't suffering a fundamental thing from which like beauty springs?
By the way, robots will never be conscious, in my opinion. You cannot have consciousness without life. There's something about life which enables, it is consciousness. Life is consciousness. I do not believe computers are alive. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to make an argument for that. And I don't think that you can have consciousness without life. There's a lot of reasons for that, which I won't get into right now. But I just want to flag that as Lex continues to make this strange argument for robots that can suffer. I think it's a ridiculous premise.
Like, without suffering, do you really think we would have beautiful things in this world?
Like, okay, that's a tangent on a tangent. We'll go there.
I will just say one thing, one reason. I'll give you one reason why you can't separate consciousness from life, in sort of a roundabout way. So this whole notion that consciousness is emergent is based on the idea that as the evolution of the universe progresses, the complexification of particle interactions becomes so intricate that in certain organisms, consciousness pops out. So you've got all these vast computational mechanisms in biology, and they're so complex they give rise to consciousness. So the premise is complexity enables consciousness. So if you believe that, which I don't, then in principle, if you made a complex enough computer, consciousness would pop out. And so that's why they believe that. But it also assumes that it's even possible to make a machine that's as complex as a living organism. Presently, that seems very unlikely. Living organisms are vastly more complex than any machinery. And also, it assumes that consciousness can emerge out of matter, and I don't believe that is true either. And there's a famous problem called the hard problem of consciousness, which illustrates a gap, an explanatory gap between mind and matter, which was coined by David Chalmers. And basically what it says is that within a materialist theory, nothing in your theory suggests that consciousness even has to exist. So how can you smuggle consciousness into materialism? So for example, Chalmers uses the conceivability argument. If you're a physicalist, a materialist, your theory just explains objective properties about the world. Science talks about objective properties that we can observe, experiment with, and control variables and create predictable outcomes, etc. Within that worldview, all you're ever doing is observing objective properties. There's nothing subjective about experimenting on penicillin. You're just watching what happens. You're watching action and reaction within a controlled lens. That in and of itself does not suggest consciousness. There's no subjectivity except for the subjectivity of the scientist who is studying it. But the subject that the scientist is studying does not entail consciousness. So materialism does not require you to believe in consciousness. Science is a method that we use, but it does not require a belief in consciousness. It's an observation of objective properties. So they have not explained the gap between subject and object. And that's a real problem. And so when they say that consciousness is emerging from material reality, what they're actually doing is saying that it's a magic trick, that if you make enough complex particle interactions, consciousness magically pops out, but they haven't explained it, they haven't demonstrated it, they've assumed it. And it's a very big problem.
I would love to go there, but let's not go there just yet.
All right.
But, I do think it would be, if anything is bad, creating hell and populating it with real minds that really can suffer in that hell, that's bad.
That's hell.
That's you are worse than any mass murderer we can name if you created. I mean, this could be in robot form, or more likely it would be in.
Thank you for your comments. I'm seeing your comments here. And Toke says, what? Well, if I confused you, let me know what your question is. I'm not sure what you're asking, but thank you for your support. And I'm glad I found out orthodoxy too. Thank you.
In some simulation of a world where we managed to populate it with conscious minds, so that whether we knew they were conscious or not, and that world is a state of that's it's unendurable. That would just taking the thesis seriously that there's nothing, that mind, intelligence, and consciousness ultimately are substrate independent, right? You don't need a biological brain to be conscious. You certainly don't need a biological brain to be intelligent, right? So if we just
again, just breezing through huge assumptions, not demonstrated, merely stated. You don't need a brain to be conscious. You don't need to be conscious to be intelligent. What do you mean? What do you think intelligence is? The ability to compute a vast amount of information and spit it back out without an understanding? ChatGPT understands nothing. Claude understands nothing. AI, your computer, your cell phone does not understand things. It presents information, but it doesn't understand what that information is. It has no relationship to that information. I would argue that intelligence requires you to have some sort of fundamental level of understanding. And in order to have a level of understanding, you need to have sentience, because you cannot understand without being able to grasp something relationally with an experiential substrate. So again, lots of premises being assumed.
Imagine that consciousness at some point comes along for the ride as you scale up in intelligence. Well, then we could find ourselves creating conscious minds that are miserable, right? And that's just like creating a person who's miserable, right? It could be worse than creating a person who's miserable. It could be even more sensitive to suffering.
Cloning them and maybe for entertainment, watching them suffer.
Just like watching a person suffer for entertainment, So, but back to your primary question here, which is differentiating consciousness and self and free will as concepts and kind of degrees of illusoriness. The problem with free will is that what most people mean by it, and that and Dan, this is where Dan Dennett is going to get off the ride here, right? So like he's going to disagree with me that I know what most people mean by it, but I have a very keen sense, having talked about this topic for many, many years and seen people get wrapped around the axle of it, and seeing in myself what it's like to have felt that I was a self that had free will, and then to no longer feel that way, right? I mean, to know what it's like to actually disabuse myself of that.
Listen to this sentence. It's so freeing to disabuse myself of the idea that I have a self. Really, really feeling great about it. You're assuming a self in the whole statement. It's a nonsensical, self-contradictory statement. It's a Euroburic statement. It's just dragon that eats its own tail. It makes no sense, but go on.
Sense, cognitively and emotionally, and to recognize what's left, what goes away and what doesn't go away on the basis of that epiphany. I I have a sense that I know what people think they have in hand when they worry about whether free will exists. And it is
People? There's no such thing as people. They're just particles floating along the universal spectrum. People don't exist. There's no self. Why are you using this language? Be consistent, Sam.
it is the flip side of this feeling of self. It's the flip side of feeling like you are not merely identical to experience. You feel like you're having an experience. You feel like you're an agent that is appropriating an experience. There's a protagonist.
You can't use the word you. Be consistent. You can't say you feel like you're an agent when you don't believe that you exists. You have to come up with a totally different language, Sam. You have to say something like, the vague collection of particles that happens to have evolved through the history of the universe that seems to be located in the spatial area which this apparent body sits in front of me appears to have secretions which look like thoughts that seem to have content that seem to suggest that there's this thing called a self, but that doesn't really exist. Would you be able to use language like that so then we can all really see how ridiculous this is?
In the movie of your life, and it is you. It's not just the movie, right? It's like there's sights and sounds and sensations and thoughts and emotions and this whole cacophony of experience, of felt experience of embodiment. But there seems to be a rider on the horse or a passenger in the body, right? People don't feel truly identical to their bodies down to their toes. They sort of feel like they have bodies. They feel like they're minds in bodies. And that feels like a self. That feels like me. And again, this gets very paradoxical when you talk about the experience of being in relationship to yourself or talking to yourself, giving yourself a pep talk. I mean, if you're the one talking, why are you also the one listening? Like, why do you need the pep talk, and why does it work if you're the one giving the pep talk, right?
Yeah.
Or if I say, like, where are my keys, right? If I'm looking for my keys, why do I think the superfluous thought, where are my keys?
I don't know why I'm doing this. This is just ridiculous. It's like it's an exercise in self-frustration. This is a stupid video. I have no idea why I decided to do this. Sam, listen. Nobody thinks that the human being is a homogeneous, simple, non-differentiated blob. Everybody that studies psychology closely notices that there's multiple parts to the self. So yes, parts exist, that there can be a part of the self that says, hey, do that. And there can be another part of the self that says, no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. We find this all the time. That's not evidence that the self doesn't exist. That's evidence that the self is complex. It's not evidence that the self is an illusion. It's evidence that the self is intricate and motivated by deep interpenetrating factors, and that as human beings, we consist of a litany of motivations and urges and abilities and agendas, and those are in conversation within the self. So it doesn't negate the self that the self is complex or has multiple parts or sub-agencies. Just like you wouldn't say that a tree can't really be a tree because it has branches. You would never use the parts to negate the whole. You would never say that the tail can't really be a part of the dog, or that a paramecium can't really be a paramecium, a single cell organism, because it consists of smaller atoms and molecules. It doesn't make any sense. So that's another problem here that Sam is quickly getting into. that saying that we have parts does not negate wholeness. In fact, wholeness, the part-whole relationship, is foundational to the whole universe, to the way that everything works. You wouldn't say that my marriage is a farce because it consists of two people. There's a whole that transcends the underlying reality of the parts. There's two people within something that we call a marriage. I'm a human organism that has many sub agencies and organs within it, many cells, a brain, a heart, a liver, kidneys, a personality with different needs and thoughts and wants. So again, it's just a horrible argument that he's making here.
I know I'm looking for the fucking keys. I'm the one looking.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I telling that, you know, that we now need to look for the keys, right? So that duality is weird, but leave that aside.
Thank you all for joining. I'm seeing your comments. I appreciate it. The Mamba, good to see you here. Yeah, I've seen you on TikTok. And Orthodoxy, it's great to see you here. I'm glad you made it to the stream today.
The sense, so, and this becomes very vivid when people try to learn to meditate. You know, most people, they close their eyes and they're told to pay attention to an object like the breath. So you close your eyes and you pay attention to the breath, and you can feel it at the tip of your nose or the rising and falling of your abdomen. And you're paying attention and you feel something vague there. And then you think, why the breath? Why am I paying attention to the breath? What's so special about the breath? And then you notice you're thinking and you're not paying attention to the breath anymore. And then you realize, okay, the practice is, okay, I should notice thoughts and then I should come back to the breath. But
who's I? You're not allowed to use the word I. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire every time you say I or you or give us any sense whatsoever that anything like identity or selfhood exists.
This starting point is the conventional starting point of feeling like you are an agent, very likely in your head, a locus of consciousness, a locus of attention.
I'm about to skip past this section because it's getting ridiculous.
It can strategically pay attention to certain parts of experience. Like I can focus on the breath and then I get lost in thought and now I can come back to the breath and I can open my eyes and I'm over here behind my face looking out at a world that's other than me. And there's this kind of subject-object perception. And that is the default starting point of selfhood, of subjectivity.
Do I even need to keep going, or did I already pretty much dismantle his whole argument? I mean, because I've already demonstrated that his premises don't operate seamlessly, and at the very least, and moreover, they're problematic, and therefore the whole foundation of his argument against free will is shaky. I mean, do I have to keep going here, or, you know, I mean, do you need more evidence than I've given?
And married to that is the sense that I can decide what to do next, right? I am an agent who can pay attention to the cup. I can listen to sounds. There's certain things that I can't control. Certain things are happening to me and I just can't control them. So for instance, if someone asks, well, can you not hear a sound, right? Like don't hear the next sound, don't hear anything for a second, or don't hear, I'm snapping my fingers, don't hear this. Where's your free will? You know?
Okay. So let's talk about this for a minute. What he's doing now is what he was doing at the beginning of the video, which is arguing that because we experience content, I'm looking at this screen right now in front of me. I have a microphone in front of me. There's words coming out of my mouth. There's sounds out there on the street. There's light pouring in through the window, right? I can see in the camera, there's a bookshelf behind me with art and books on it. Because I don't have control over that, the fact that those things are happening perceptually means that I'm not free to make choices. That is a horrible argument, and it's not very sophisticated. What that demonstrates is that we don't control perceptual inflow. But it says nothing about how we respond to what comes in. It says nothing about the complexity of the interaction between my environment and myself, right? It says nothing about my ability to assess, engage, to will, to decide, to interpret. I might interpret something and decide I want something different. Oh, wow, the light is coming in. You know, it's a little bright for me, and I've got a mild headache, so I'm going to shut the shutters a little more. That's a choice, right? Now you could say, well, that's not a free choice because you were preconditioned by your biochemistry to do exactly what you just did, okay? But that's a circular argument. It starts with the premise that choice doesn't exist. It then uses a statement that doesn't demonstrate anything, and then ends up right back at the conclusion. So the fact that we are perceiving, feeling, sensing, all that says is that we are an organism, a human being that is conscious and is presented with a world which is beyond our ability to control. I can't control the fact that I'm sitting on a chair that is holding me. I can't control the physics of the chair, right? Now I can get up, but I can't control the dynamic of me being on the chair, right? That's physics. I can't control that this table's here. It's here right now in this moment. Now I can move it, but I can't control that right now in this second. It's right here. That has nothing to do with free will. So, and also the fact that some of you will argue, well, you have emotions and you have inside impulses that you can't control. Well, to some extent, we need to unpack this a little bit. I can't control every sensation and every emotion, but I can certainly control how I respond to it. And I don't accept the idea that the self is an illusion. So I believe that we have souls, and that consciousness has to do with being a soul that is God-given, and that we don't live in a meaningless random universe, that we are beings that have the ability to sense and perceive and respond, and that freedom is about being embodied and making meaningful choices within that embodiment, and that we have all these different inputs, which we get to interpret. Now, we can't control everything that we find valuable or not interesting or attractive or repulsive. We have certain embedded systems that genetically, neurologically prime us to initially be predisposed to react in certain ways, right? But that does not confine us. That merely gives us a constraining input. Then we have to choose and react. For example, have you ever found yourself starting to get angry at somebody and then you just said, wait a second, I don't want to lose my temper because I have a higher value than the anger value that says love your neighbor. So instead of letting myself get angry, I'm going to try to regulate that impulse and quiet it down and not be reactive to this person, even though I could. You see, the fact that we have an impulse doesn't automatically mean that we are controlled by it. I've been sober for, I don't know, a long time now, since 2010, so 16 years, from drugs and alcohol. When I was a teenager, I had a drug and alcohol abuse issue. And my sobriety was a choice, right? Because if you believe in Sam Harris's determinism, then I never had a choice to use drugs and alcohol, and it was just happening to me. And then I never had a choice to get sober. It was just happening to me. But that's not how it happened at all. I had to work really hard on myself as an agent to not let those factors determine me. Now, I couldn't control that I liked the feeling of alcohol. I liked it. I enjoyed it. There was a part of me that enjoyed it. But I could control the fact that all things being considered, it was affecting my family relationships. It was affecting my life as a very, very young man, a teenager. It was affecting my ability to grow and become and learn. All these other factors were also inputs. And the role of consciousness is to integrate the inputs and make choices. So Sam is saying because we can't control the inputs, therefore the choices have no meaning. And what I am saying is the inputs are the information upon which we interpret and make decisions and make choices. Without inputs, choices have no meaning. So the very thing that he says negates free will, I believe supports it. Because without a body, without some sort of constraining reality, no choice that we could ever make would have any relevance or meaning. There wouldn't be any such thing as choice, because choice demands specificity and personhood. You have to be in a specific situation to make a choice. There's no such thing as a general situation. Every situation you've ever been in your life is specific. And I believe this is why the incarnation of Christ is such an important fact of reality, that being embodied is essential to what it means to be a person. And being a person means that you're always specific. You're always in a situation. You're always what Martin Heidegger calls thrown. Okay? So think about this for a second. It's really common sense when you just unpack it. Free will only has meaning if you, one, have a body, are a person in a situation. Okay? Free will has no meaning if you're a collection of particles that doesn't exist in relationship to space and time and have no personhood. So his argument is circular because it assumes the premises that he wants to conclude. Okay? But I would argue that because we have bodies, because we have consciousness, because we can demonstrate that these things exist, because we have relationships and motivations and goals, all these things are evidence for the fact that choice matters, not evidence against it. So I believe in the final analysis, this whole assault on free will is really an assault on the human soul. And it's nihilistic. It's trying to lead us down a road which says, you don't matter. This doesn't matter. This life doesn't matter. It's an operational convenience. Those who would try to say that this is somehow a philosophically sophisticated position can only do so by erecting these nonsensical premises and making them sound scientific, when they're really not scientific. So my whole point in doing this video is to defend the idea of freedom and to help us realize that freedom doesn't mean that you're free from every single constraint. It is about how you operate within the constraints. It is what it is. It's what we do with it that matters. Right now in this moment, I'm in the moment that I'm in. And there are many possibilities of what I could do next. It's my choice. What I do with it matters. Even if in the last moment I was angry, I was self-shaming myself, I was in this horrible state of mind, right? In this moment, anything I could make a choice to try something different. That's the whole premise of transformational psychology. That's the whole premise of repentance, of making a turn. Without free will, none of it matters. None of it makes sense. And if you're one of those people who is convinced by Sam's argument, then hold his feet to the fire and you yourself hold yourself to the language standards. You cannot use the word self. You cannot use the word I. You cannot use the word you. You cannot say I want something. You have to describe everything in objective principles. You should speak in coded computer language, which is impossible. So you can't even live in the very world that you're trying to tell me exists. You don't live in that world where free will doesn't exist. It's a conceptual fantasy that's been made up that you're putting on and telling everyone, hey, you don't have free will. You don't live in that world where you don't have free will. You don't speak that way. You can't convince me that it's an illusion without just stating it. You have to demonstrate things. We can't just state things. Demonstrate to me why you don't have freedom. Demonstrate it without conflating a bunch of unproven premises. I'm going to check the comments now. I've got my phone here. Yeah, quantum mechanics shows that reality is indeterminate, meaning that it's not able to be predicted with certainty. So we know that even the universe doesn't operate deterministically. Now, scientists sometimes try to say it's randomness, or chaos, or they'll say noise or stochasticism. Those are all words for randomness. And what that really means is that we don't understand it. So when we don't understand something, we call it random, when we can't predict it. That's all it means. So yes, quantum mechanics, at the very least, shows that reality is indeterminate as far as I can tell. Yeah, exactly. Orthodoxy says the best excuse to say in sin is that we do not have free will. Exactly. That is the best excuse. The best excuse is to do what you want to do, and then say you didn't have a choice then to do it. So, and I don't believe that this is just an intellectually inconsequential, harmless conversation. I don't think it's harmless to run around teaching people they don't have free will. I think it's a damaging, untrue, and functionally ridiculous statement. Nobody lives that way. And if you can't live it, how true is your philosophy really? If it doesn't conform to the pattern of reality that you experience on a day-to-day basis as a human being, if you can't map it on to the dynamics of your life, and it's just this idea, how real is it? Also, okay, Bud might be referring to the collapse of the wave function, which some quantum theorists believe that consciousness is required to collapse the wave function into a particle. That's one of many interpretations. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not a quantum physicist, but it's a very interesting field of study, to say the least. And it does point to the dynamics of freedom in the universe to some degree, in my opinion. Stuart Kaufman is a theoretical biologist who's also very interesting on the quantum relationship to free will, and I find that useful. So I'm grateful that I have free will. I'm grateful that I am a soul and not just a blob of particles that doesn't really exist. I'm grateful, and I believe it's the basis of meaning. So unless you believe that we live in a truly nihilistic universe, then I think we have to accept that free will is real and to push back when people try to tell us that it's fake. And at the very least, ask them to demonstrate their position more clearly without just saying, you don't have a choice because you have biochemistry. So your blood is pumping, your heart is pumping, and your blood is flowing, and you have all these hormones and all these neurons firing, and all those things are happening, and you're just along for the ride because I said so. It's like, okay, well, that's not the only interpretation of biology. That's your idea. But biology doesn't necessitate that we don't believe in free will. It just shows that we have a vehicle. It just shows that we have an embodied reality. Right? Just like when you're if you're in a car, you have a vehicle, and there are certain things you can do and certain things you can't do in a car. The car's not a boat, so I don't recommend driving it off the bridge. Trying to see if you can float. the car has parameters, but within those parameters, you can take a left turn, you can take a right turn, you can go 80 or you can go 10, right? You have constraints which enable possibilities. Now, if you weren't in a car, none of those things matter because now all of a sudden you're not driving. So it doesn't matter what choices you have when you're in the car when you're not in the car. The choices that we have only matter to the situation that we're in. So I want you to think of choice as parameters and a space of possibilities, not as strict deterministic outcomes. Choice is about what we do within the space we've been given. I love when St. Paul talks about the gifts we've been given by the Spirit. So think about that in terms of free will. We have a certain gift, whether it's to teach, to encourage, whatever it might be, and that you can consider that as sort of a parameter space. There's a lot of different ways you could do that. So your free will is about how you want to put it into practice. How do you want to work with it, right? Or we all have different sins that we struggle with. We all have a different cross to bear, right? Some people struggle with certain temptations more than others because that's our unique embodied situation. Some of that might be because of our genetics. Some of that might be because of our spiritual path. Some of that might be because of our life history. Some of that might be because of just things that are outside of our control in our life circumstance right now. And that's our cross to bear. But it's what we do within those parameters that matter. That's the space of value. So free will is never about not having constraints. It's about what you do within the space that you're given. What Sam does is what's called a straw man argument of free will. You can't control that you have thoughts or feelings, or you can't control that you have biochemistry. Therefore, you don't have free will. You can't control the sound that you just heard outside. Therefore, it's not free. Give me a break. Does this really need to be unpacked so deeply? I guess so. I guess so. Okay, Bud says, it's a bit difficult to explain, and I don't want to make a mistake, but there's a lot of research on this. Yes, I agree with you that there's a lot of quantum research on free will. Definitely worth looking into. Not something that I'm an expert in, so I will restrain myself. I try to stay with what I'm good at over here, with what I actually am qualified to talk about. So God bless you all. Thank you for being here. Do you have any other questions or comments about free will before I release myself from the live stream and say goodbye? I do really think it's important that we understand we have a soul. Having a soul is fundamental to this whole free will notion. If you don't have a soul, then you're back to being a robot with the illusion of having consciousness. I'm very grateful for the community here. Thank you all for tuning in. I had a lot of fun today. I'm going to keep doing live streams every so often. I'll try to schedule them further in advance when I can so that it's announced a couple days or a day or so in advance so that people have a chance to join. Today was just a spontaneous stream. And as a matter of fact, I should probably get going. So I've got some other things I need to take care of today, but God bless you all. And if you don't mind, if you haven't already, then hit that subscribe button, like the video, maybe leave a comment on the video once it's posted, not just in the live chat. Just let me know what your thoughts on what I said were. I love engaging with the comments whenever I can. Thank you. God bless you all. And Orthodoxy says, Sam is insufferable. You made great points. Yeah, I don't want to make it seem like everything Sam says is bad or anything. I just don't agree with him on free will and some other things. Sometimes he has some interesting things to say. What I try to do is take people one thing at a time, right? Because we're all complex human beings. And there are probably some things that I say that I'll disagree with tomorrow or next year, right? So we're all in a process of becoming. So what I try to do is not take a person's argument or their idea and make it about them as a person. There are some ways in which I've heard some things Sam said that have been interesting or useful to think about, and other things he said that I just think are ridiculous. So it's not about bashing Sam, although I do think his argument on free will is insufferable orthodoxy. I totally agree with you on that. But it's about holding each other accountable for the ideas that we spread and testing them. And I would like to be tested too. You know, I often change my mind about things, or I strengthen my position, or I see where I had a weakness or a misunderstanding, and I want to get it right, and I want to be accurate. You know, I'm not interested in just being polemical or having a rhetoric just to be right. I'd rather be accurate. You know, if I say something that's factually incorrect, I want to fix it right away. I'd rather be accurate than right. So my opinion on all of this is that it's not about the people being good, bad. It's about the journey of finding truth. And if I didn't care about that, I wouldn't be becoming a Christian. But the version of me 3 years ago would have looked at me becoming an Orthodox Christian and said, have you lost your mind? You're becoming a Christian? Because I wouldn't have understood it. So I'm in a process of becoming. So I give that same liberty to everybody, that we are not our ideas, we are not our philosophies, but we are human beings that can grow and become and change. And I hope that we can all strive for that sort of humility. But to be fair, Sam Harris's smug attitude when he thinks he's right is absolutely infuriating. So yes, we need to pray for him, like Okay Bud says. God bless you all. I have such a great community here. I can't tell you how much everything that you have all done for me has helped me get through a very hard time in my life right now. The community has been excellent. I've never felt so supported by an online community in my life. It feels like a very spiritual connection. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I really mean that there's something special about this community and what you're all doing to help me. So have a good day. I'm gonna hop off now, and this has been a true joy.